According to those in the know, we can expect to experience more and more 90-degree plus days, both happening earlier in the year and more often. So here's the question. Is this rising toll of health effects and climate change connected to this weather? Short answer, yes.
Hottest June on record so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me say it like this. Right now, we are putting in, according to a senior scientist with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's Global Monitoring Laboratory, said that we are putting 40 billion metric tons of CO2, that's carbon dioxide, pollution, to the atmosphere per year. And I ask a simple question. How can you put that much of anything anywhere and not expect it to have an impact? That's like taking a gallon of water, trying to put it in a 12-ounce glass.
40 billion metric tons.
A year. Now, add that up 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. Now, granted, when the auto industry started, we weren't putting that level in the atmosphere.
A lot less people with vehicles, yeah.
But it wasn't, in those days, it wasn't transportation, it was industry.
Yeah.
They was still putting foolishness in the air. Steel, cement,
make people
manufacturing.
sick. I mean, literally, that's people wouldn't live as long because they'd be in the city and just breathing that crap in.
So my question is, how do you think putting all that greenhouse gas in the air is going to impact? 1972. I was a Boy Scout. We were on our way to the Boy Scout headquarters in northern New Jersey. We stopped for lunch in Jersey to where we could look across the Hudson River into Manhattan. I will never forget the view. About 50 feet above the city was a thick brown haze. For the first time, I saw smog. What happens when you have a city with that stuff is all sorts of respiratory health and heart ailments.
Yeah.
They said about photochemical smog, because when the sun hits it, it recombines. They said, and this was years ago, that it was creating chemicals, different chemicals than the chemicals that were going up there. And at a point, were some 400 different chemicals in that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it like Venus has that much CO2 in the air? I mean, no, probably even way more. That's part of what contributes it to being, it has the greenhouse effect all the time. That's what contributes it to being, uninhabitable. It's unlivable, obviously. Mm-hmm. But yeah, sizzling temperatures are baking the West with readings about 15 to 30 degrees more above normal, bringing dangerous conditions and highs above 100 degrees to 40 million people.
When I was a kid, and I lived in Massachusetts growing up, nobody had air conditioning. We didn't need it. I'm not even lying.
No, yeah. When I watch old shows, they talk about it.
Well, here's the thing. In Massachusetts, we had 2 weeks of hot weather in August. That's it. 2 weeks where it got hot, like 85 plus. 2 weeks. The first car I ever owned, the first brand new car I ever owned, bought off the showroom floor, didn't have air conditioning. Nobody had central air growing up. You didn't need it. You hoisted a window, it was fine. In the past, from 1971 to 2000, and I'm talking about the state I grew up in, Massachusetts logged an average of 4 days above 90 degrees. But by the middle of this century, they expect that number to be between 10 and 28 days. And by the end of this century, they expect it to be between 13 and 56 days. If you have respiratory problems, heat stroke, hard to breathe, other ailments because of what you're breathing in, and typically, the people most impacted are poor folks living in a city with all that cement that absorbing all that heat and holding it, making it completely unbearable.
Yeah.
Not to mention the demands on the power grid, because if you're needing that, really.
Texas right now. You saw that again, right? They're having issues. They're telling them to pull back already.
Can I be surprised right now?
Yeah.
Can I be shocked
for
a minute?
My goodness.
Gee, wow. Anyway. Massachusetts, again for an example, has warmed 2 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 100 years. People, it doesn't sound like much, but that's major.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Salt Lake City, we've tied the highest temperature ever recorded at Salt Lake City in any month of the year in the last 147 years of records. It's only happened twice before, July 2002 and July 1960. And real quick, I want to make a point. People might think, oh, this is just, it's recent timelines. It's little cycles that happens. We can measure average temperatures back 700, 800,000 years. And at one point in my life, I'm like, how could they possibly do that? That makes no sense. And I learned recently, and it blew my mind. It makes total sense. They can just dig down in ice up in Antarctica or wherever there's really thick ice, and you can measure the CO2 the deeper you go. So that's basically how deep we've been able to go. We measure it back 800,000 years. And if you look at any of the charts of what we've discovered from that, you realize we're in trouble.
I'll even tell you the year we got in big trouble, 1750.
1750.
The start of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
When we were burning wood, then coal, whale oil, and now, all sorts of fossil fuels. We started then.
And we could get away with it a little probably because of population, right? Because, it wasn't just as many people.
But bear in mind, it was additive. It's accumulative. Every single year, that stuff went into the atmosphere.
Your boss's story reminded me of that one I learned recently about the one in Great Britain in the 50s where
47.
The inversion. Where the inversion happened, and
people died.
Same old argument that it's gonna go away. It's gonna be fun. All of a sudden, people started dying.
The fog matched with that stuff as it combined, and the pollution, and people died
because it hung over the city, and it literally blocked the sun out. I mean, they hardly could see the sun. It was like hardly daylight for days.
And the fact that the smog combined with the pollution to cause all sorts of respiratory ailments.
Yeah, people getting
problems.
Sick. Oh yeah,
yeah, they couldn't breathe.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
this is in the 50s.
Yeah, that stuff happens. That was then. One other thing I noticed the last time I was in Massachusetts, I thought the state literally was a lot swampier than I remember growing up. And I have to believe that that's got to be some kind of offshoot of climate change, because for a while, Massachusetts would get all kinds of rain in the ways that we didn't used to get. I mean, to the point where places I remember that were never wet and marshy were wet and marshy. And like, ooh, this is not okay. This is weird. So there are actual measurable things that we're seeing now happen. And like anything else, because of where you live and your ability to be mobile, typically impacts lower income, older Americans and people of color, because they end up being in the worst neighborhoods, exposed to the worst of the pollution, the heat impact, all of the nasty stuff.
It's harder for them to move too.
Well, they can't.
Yeah.
We just talked about, just made worse. So the question is, what do we do about it? Well, a 2020 study, again, talking about Boston, under a worst case scenario, Boston could see 200 to 500 excess deaths from extreme heat in about 70 years. And in fact, Boston, we reported on this, talked about dealing with climate change and rising sea levels now. And they're actually dealing with that right now.
And that brings us to the end of our program.